after Tennessee's appearance at SEC Media Days on Tuesday, Josh Heupel actually revealed to Chris Lowe a new play calling plan for Tennessee this fall, which is that in addition to him being the primary play caller with Joey Halzle as the offensive coordinator, Glen Elarbee is going to join Halzle as the guy involved in play calling duties to help Josh Heupel. Ellerby is Heupel's offensive line coach. They have worked together for 9 years. And honestly, this is a shocking development. It's shocking actually for a few reasons. First off, it's not that common for offensive line coaches to become offensive coordinators anyway. It happens. I mean, Philip Fulmer was a line coach and became a head coach. Sharon Moore was a line coach at Michigan and has become a head coach. They both were offensive coordinators first. Jim Chaney was an offensive line coach. That was his specialty. But typically you think of your offensive coordinators to be quarterbacks coaches. Tennessee has been unique. Alex Golesh was a tight ends coach and was an offensive coordinator. But it's a little odd that Josh Heupel would do it because Glen Elarbee seemed like a guy that was specifically there to develop the offensive line to complement the system that Josh Heupel runs. So to have Ellerby in there with play calling duties, it's kind of odd. And there's a few ways I want to go with this. One, there's a positive. Maybe this is more proof that Josh Heupel develops his offense in a system around the trenches. And he believes in the trenches and he believes in physicality and being able to run the ball. And we always knew that. Like the idea that it was all finesse drove him crazy because if you really looked at his offense, that wasn't the case. They want the vertical rushing attack. And that seems more true now. It seems like he wants to make that a basis of the offense and more of a focal point. But this could also be a concern. What if he doesn't believe in Joey Halzle? Now, I said blaming Halzle last year was unfair. He didn't go get Joe Milton. That was Josh Heupel, and Joe Milton was not a fit for this offense. But beyond Joe Milton, I got to give Joe Milton a break. Joe Milton lost his go-to receiver in Brew McCoy to an injury. He lost his second number 2 receiver in Dante Thornton to an injury. He spent the first half of the season without his center in Cooper Mays, and there was no backup, and the offense desperately needs Cooper Mays to go. And then he didn't have a lot of help from the defense down the stretch, not just because of the secondary, but because the linebacker in the heart of the defense to keep everybody in line, Keenan Peely, went down with a season-ending injury. And Elijah Herring, that was the first game of the year, and Elijah Herring, while smart, was just not athletic enough to fill that void. So Joe Milton had a lot of his own unfortunate situations, but Joey Halzle was limited and was with Joe Milton, and Milton was limited with the offensive weapons in general, as was Halzle. So to compare Halzle to what Alex Golesh had to work with the year before was just totally unfair. However, there were always red flags when coordinators or assistants are assistants for a long time before they're promoted. There's a reason, for instance, guys, that John Chavis never got a head coaching job. There's a reason it took so long to hire Brent Venables as a head coach. Now, you could say the same thing with Kirby Smart and Mark Richt, the 2 Georgia head coaches back-to-back, but honestly, if you really know the inner workings of that, Kirby Smart and Mark Richt, both were longtime coordinators and were just waiting for the right hire. They actually could have gotten other jobs, but they didn't want them. They were waiting for the right place to go. Quite honestly, Joey Halzle was an assistant to Josh Heupel for years, back when Josh Heupel was an offensive coordinator. He left coaching college football to go into the private sector for a little while. Many people may believe because he was never promoted. He comes back. He still stays an assistant. First of all, he was an off-field assistant for a while. Then he was an on-field assistant. It took him 10 to 12 years to get promoted at all. And finally, after Alex Golesh leaves, just for continuity, Heupel makes Joey Halzle the offensive coordinator. And then within a year, he did, with Heupel the primary play caller. And then within a year, he decides that Halzle's going to have to split some of the coordinating duties with Glen Elarbee. Now, you may say he's not really splitting coordinating duties. Now, and I want to be fair again to steelman this on Josh Heupel's favor, that he was always the primary play caller. That was the case with Alex Golesh. And the other point of this is, in Josh Heupel's system particularly, play calling is overrated. Most of it's what the quarterback does. The quarterback reads the safety. They run so much tempo. The quarterback reads the safety and makes a decision, and the quarterback has to call the plays on the field. That's the way this goes. But to have an extra cook in the kitchen just seems like Josh Heupel is just skeptical of what Joey Halzle can do. And that could be a red flag for Tennessee this year with Nico Iamaleava. That's one to bring up. Is Josh Heupel gunning to move Halzle out or demote him to make Glen Elarbee his offensive coordinator long-term? Did Glen Elarbee strong-arm him and say, I want this promotion because I'm tired of being a line coach and I'd like to try to move up the ranks a little bit and Josh Heupel needs Glen Elarbee as his offensive line coach for now. Could that be the case? We don't know. There's a lot of reasons he could be doing this. Was Glen Elarbee already in it? I think another rational explanation is, look, there's a lot of play calling that goes for the offensive line. Cooper Mays does a lot of play calling for his unit and the line up front. And maybe this is why Glen Elarbee is getting involved, because he's got to work with the line. And also the other layer to this is helmet communication. Now that coaches can directly communicate to the field, you might see offensive linemen much more involved in play calling because they can communicate directly to their centers and people like that, I believe, what formations to do. So there's a lot of reasons that Josh Heupel could have made this decision to make Glen Elarbee a play caller, but it's a very odd one. And it's even more odd when your offensive line coach isn't just your full-on promoted offensive coordinator. Typically, if they're not an offensive coordinator, they're just locked in as a line coach, as a trenches coach for their career. And oftentimes very good at it. Look at a guy like Rodney Garner, who is a defensive line coach. I don't know how much hand Rodney Garner has in the actual play calling. I think in general, though, it's weird for Josh Heupel to have Glen Elarbee involved in the play calling when he's got the quarterbacks coach and Joey Halzle doing it, and also given his tempo and everything he runs. Maybe he's ahead of the curve. It's possible, guys, he's actually ahead of the curve on this. The root of this is that the play calling is mostly going to come from Nico Iamaleava and Cooper Mays, guys. Those are going to be the guys calling the plays. Josh Heupel's the primary play caller on the sideline. Joey Halzle is the coordinator, and then Glen Elarbee is going to have a hand in it. That's how this is going to go. And Elias brings up maybe they're transitioning to a combination sort of play calling, line formation, blocking scheme, and motion route. That's what I'm thinking. And I think it largely has to do with the helmet communication now that's allowed. So I think because of the helmet communication, you might see more things like this. You might see more play callers doing specific things for specific units. Largely because of the helmet communication, and now they can direct formations the way they need to. Now, again, there's no quote-unquote passing game coordinator like there is oftentimes with other schools. But if you're going to do this type of play calling, you also could use Kelsey Pope to talk to his receivers, because a lot of this is about running the right routes. But I think many of them want the quarterback and receiver to be on the same page, and too many cooks in the kitchen can create a level of confusion. I think that's probably why you're not seeing Kelsey Pope have a hand involved in this. Glen Elarbee, a lot of what Tennessee does is the offensive line making the right calls, particularly in the interior. It's not about maintaining blocks in the offense. It's about blocking to a side or blocking directionally so the running back can hit the hole quickly, so the defense has to respect those 4 or 5 yard runs, because if they don't have to respect them, the deep passing plays in Josh Heupel's offense won't be there. That's always been the case. That's why running back is such a big issue for Tennessee this year. And I don't think they have the right guy yet, because they need a guy that can do that regularly 25 to 30 times at some points in some matchups, while also being able to pick up pass pro. We haven't seen that yet. So it's interesting where this is going to all end up. Again, Alex Golesh was a trenches physical type of coach who was an offensive coordinator for Josh Heupel too. But I also want to point out that Alex Golesh was a tight ends coach. Oftentimes tight ends coach are analysts, on-field analyst, which analyst is a new thing in college football with the way they've changed the rules. Now you can have more on-field analysts, but tight ends coaches are oftentimes on-field analysts. And so they kind of develop things schematically, and the tight ends coach is just a way for them to be on the field doing it. It's a glorified analyst role where they're actually on the field, but they can use them a lot more. But this could probably potentially help Tennessee's offensive line. Maybe even if Cooper Mays goes down again, maybe this is whatever person filling in for Cooper Mays needed at center, is just more help and direction from the coaches. And with the helmet communication and Glen Elarbee, this could be how that happens.